Marvel Comics King in Black full recap. Let's go. So, if you haven't read the King in Black storyline for yourself, then it is an absolute must read. It's dark, intense, it's terrifying in places, and I just think it's well worth a read. We are going to be going over the 5 main issues of the King in Black storylines. If you don't know already, I am CrookedDistrict. This is my channel, panels and pages. It'd be really helpful if you could subscribe, like, comment. For the meantime, let's crack on. King in Black, issues 1 to 5 recap. Let's go. Chapter 1, Reign. We open with Eddie Brock as he reflects on the impending doom he feels coming to Earth. Knull, the Lord of the Abyss, the god of the Symbiotes, is about to arrive on Earth. Eddie is currently communicating with Captain America, along with the rest of the Avengers, discussing a plan to prepare for the invasion. Eddie is full of fear, not just for the upcoming battle, but also for his son, Dylan. Eddie feels guilty for involving his innocent child to the horrors we will soon witness. Captain America, She-Hulk, Captain Marvel, and Iron Man discuss their defenses. Empty Skrull and Kree ships lie dormant in space above Earth, reconfigured as bombs ready to be detonated. As they observe the army of symbiotic dragons through the computer screens, it's apparent that they are underprepared for the sheer numbers coming to Earth. As part of the plan, the ships all explode and take out only a small fraction of Knull's army. Eddie is currently rushing his son Dylan into an underground bunker. He is trying to move fast, but Dylan wants to help. He speculates that his unique powers are similar to Knull's, so maybe there is something he can do. Potentially take control of the symbiote hive mind himself. Eddie, clearly full of guilt, reassures Dylan that he never deserved the life Eddie unintentionally put him in. Dylan pleads with Eddie to not lock him away in the bunker, but Eddie closes the door, simply stating, "I love you, son." The invasion has begun. New York is currently swarmed with Knull's dragons as we see heroes fighting back. Thor's absence is a huge hurdle as Knull's weakness includes lightning, cosmic power, and magic. Professor X, along with a team of X-Men, join the fight. Cyclops, Wolverine, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, Cable, and others all try to fight off the oncoming swarm. Eddie is continuing with his part of the plan. He heads to the spire in which Dark Carnage was previously able to control the symbiotes to attempt to take control of them himself. As Eddie taps into the hive mind, he very quickly realizes the situation is far worse than they initially thought. Through the army of dragons, we see at least 3 symbiote celestials arrive on Earth, carrying Knull with them. Knull steps out and declares, "I'm going to kill your world. In the meantime, I am looking for a human named Brock." Knull sweeps down to approach the Avengers, mocking them as he refers to them as just a welcome party. Captain America smiles, stating that the Avengers are only here to watch today. Next we see Sentry confidently, swiftly, and aggressively take out one of the Celestials. Knull is startled and angered by this. Sentry grabs Knull and flies him through the air, almost bragging as he introduces himself as Bob, aka the Sentry. Knull is aware of who he is, as Sentry was the one to kill Carnage. He then proceeds to do the unthinkable. He grabs a hold of Sentry and literally tears him apart before mocking the Avengers. He says he is not impressed. He thought Earth may be worthy of a battle, but apparently not. Suddenly, we see the symbiotic fluid that's covering everything start to move. It begins to latch onto, cover, and absorb the Avengers as they cry out for help. We zoom out to see the same is happening across the entire planet. The once blue Earth is now covered in a symbiotic barrier as it blocks out the sun, plunging the entire planet into darkness. Eddie has accepted his fate. He knows that he must surrender himself to Knull. Venom agrees. Knull intends to destroy the planet, but potentially this will buy our heroes some time. Venom calls to Knull via the hive mind, and Knull almost instantly appears before Eddie and Venom. Dragging them both with him, heads outside to show the state of the battlefield as it's covered in symbiotic fluid. But Knull is confused. He recognizes Eddie, but then begins to apologize for the misunderstanding. When he stated he was looking for Brock, he didn't specify which one. It has become apparent Knull is searching for his son, Dylan. Eddie begins to plead with Knull, begging to take him instead of his son. Knull proceeds to separate Venom from Eddie, pulling the symbiote away from him and leaving him defenseless. "I'm afraid I don't have much use for you, host," before dropping Eddie from the top of the building. Chapter 2, Fall. Eddie Brock lies injured and defenseless as Spider-Man arrives, looking worse for wear himself. Eddie can barely let out a whisper as he asks Spider-Man to promise to protect his son, Dylan. Spider-Man is pleading for someone to help before a spidey sense warns him of an oncoming attack. After dodging, he looks up to see a symbiotic team of heroes, including Cyclops, Captain America, Thing, and Storm, all under Knull's control. Next, we see the Human Torch coming to the rescue, swooping down to Spider-Man and taking out a symbiotic dragon on his way. He tells Spider-Man to take Eddie to the Fantastic Four's lab, offering to go up against the symbiote team of heroes. Knowing he wasn't likely to make it through this fight, he asks Spider-Man, "Tell everyone I said something cool and heroic before I fell, yeah?" Spider-Man flees desperately, with an unconscious Eddie as we see a large ball of fire explode from the ground. Eddie now lies in a bed, all sorts of medical equipment and tubes linked up to him. Spider-Man and Jane Foster Valkyrie discuss how time is running out before Eddie's injuries kill him. Leaving Eddie in the lab along with Reed Richards, Spider-Man visits Dylan in an underground bunker. Dylan's eyes lower to the ground as he is expecting to hear bad news. Spider-Man requests that he packs his stuff and leave the bunker, but Dylan simply asks, "Is my dad dead?" Dylan and Spider-Man enter the lab to be greeted by Reed and Sue Richards, the Black Panther, Valkyrie, and Blade, who is currently communicating with Professor X and Magneto. They discuss the potential plans for bringing more numbers to join the heroes as they fight back, including Agent Coulson enlisting the Squadron Supreme, bringing more mutants to the battlefield, and the Wakandan army. Blade seems to underestimate Knull's power, and Valkyrie reminds him that Knull has killed Celestials, the Sentry, and taken down almost all of the Avengers before drowning the world in darkness. Yes, Knull needs to be taken seriously. Namor arrives, confident as he describes Knull as adorable. Blade rolls his eyes as Namor arrives, and Reed Richards is clearly uncomfortable with his presence. Namor announces that his army is ready for war. He asks, "Any of the adults in the room actually have anything to offer in the way of a plan?" Iron Man, who has been silently observing Eddie, speaks up to say that he does. He is going to need one of Knull's dragons. He intends to restore Eddie by collecting a symbiote in order to keep Eddie alive. He is the only one that can break into the hive mind and give them a chance. Next, we see Namor at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, in order to release an Atlantean team called the Black Tide to assist in the battle. Blade is in Chernobyl, attempting to recruit Dracula and the vampires to the fight. At the bar with no name, Kingpin steps forward to ask all of the villains currently sitting around if they wish to make some money. Back to Iron Man, who is currently tracking down one of the dragons before injecting it with Extremis. This would block the connection to the hive mind and essentially rewrite its DNA. This doesn't go as expected as Iron Man screams out, "Too much! Millions of voices, all of them in so much pain! I can see it all!" It appears his plan isn't working as expected and the hive mind is fighting back against the Extremis. A symbiotic suited Iron Man appears in the Fantastic Four lab, clearly rushing to give Eddie the collected symbiote before Knull is able to take over his programming. Everything goes wrong. All of the medical equipment starts to beep loudly as Eddie's vitals begin to spike. A mad rush ensues as Reed Richards, Spider-Man, and Iron Man attempt to pull the symbiote off of Eddie's body. Dylan looks up, his eyes glowing red as he screams. Surprisingly, the symbiote completely disappears, melting and disintegrating at Dylan's command. Reed Richards, in both a state of shock and also excitement, tells Dylan that this is the answer. Dylan is their secret weapon against Knull and his army. The power he demonstrated is potentially the key to saving the world. With everything that just happened, it took a moment before everyone realized what has happened in front of them. Eddie has passed. Lying in bed as Dylan begins to cry. We see Eddie falling, surrounded by darkness as he speaks to himself. He observes that the connection he always had to Venom, Dylan, and the hive mind has finally been broken. He has always felt a connection, but this time, it's different. Chapter 3, Thunder. We open to a voice describing the balance of light and darkness in the universe. An opposite, an equal. Knull is the reason that this light is dim and weakened. Billions of souls gone, planets devoid of life. The voice says they can feel it all, but above all of that, they sense the unbearable sorrow of Dylan after watching his father, Eddie, pass while still in a bed within the Fantastic Four's lab, as they are surrounded by the ongoing battle against Knull and his army. Blade and his army of vampires struggle to hold back the symbiotic swarm, Sue Richards urges Reed to do something soon as they are running out of time. Reed discovers something unusual. Using a drive that was given to Eddie by Rafe, he uncovers some sort of energy that seems to link with Dylan's power. Reed struggles to fully understand it, only that it's as if it's pulling something from somewhere outside of this world. They intend to escort Dylan out of the lab to combat against the symbiotes. He is their secret weapon. Top priority is to protect Dylan. Spider-Man sympathizes with Dylan and attempts to console him before Dylan, looking up with black and red eyes, says, "I need to hurt something," clearly angry and ready to tap into his newfound power. Our heroes, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Sue Richards and Dylan Brock, join the fight. Captain America, covered head to toe in a symbiote, under the control of Knull and the Hive Mind. He launches the shield at Dylan, a throw that was aiming to kill him. Dylan catches the shield surprisingly easy before using the power to remove the symbiote from Captain America, hoping that Knull will not only feel it, but be hurt by destroying the symbiote latching to Captain America. Knull is currently standing above the city, high up on top of a building observing the battle. He screams in pain as Dylan is able to destroy the symbiotes below. Once Knull sees Dylan, he uses the symbiote fluid on the ground to form a huge hand to reach out and grab him. Dylan isn't strong enough to push the symbiote hand away. A huge bolt of lightning strikes the hand, protecting Dylan and confusing Knull. Knull knows its power. It's familiar to him, but who could it be? Thor has finally arrived. He greets them before they both continue fighting alongside each other, wiping out symbiotes in every direction, saving the previously transformed heroes back into themselves, disconnecting them from the Hive Mind. The voice continues to narrate over the fight. They sense that our heroes are going to lose. No matter how well they fight the darkness back, Knull, the Void King, continues to rise. Knull sweeps down to face off against Thor directly. Knull attempts to intimidate Thor by reminding him that he is both a god and a king. Thor isn't bothered by the titles and attacks Knull directly, launching himself towards Knull with Mjolnir. Knull is too fast and too strong. He quickly grabs a hold of Thor before throwing him to the ground. Thor tells Dylan to run before Knull easily throws him back. The heroes continue to struggle fighting off the horde of symbiotes. Dylan is captured and absorbed by the symbiotic fluid, as his powers are too weak to take on the sheer numbers of Knull's army. Thor breaks out of Knull's grasp. He stands up and announces that Midgard is under his protection. He has killed hundreds just like Knull in the past, all claiming to be the one true death, the living void, the end. Thor has had enough and lands a devastating blow against Knull. Using Mjolnir, he hits Knull so hard his bottom jaw is cleanly removed from his face. Knull finally activates his symbiotic celestials. These large giants begin to glow as they start to engage in the battle. Massive energy blasts start to destroy the city around them. Thor is distracted by this for long enough that Knull is able to draw his weapon, the Necro Sword, and stab Thor in the back. Reed calls out from his lab trying to figure out what's happening. With no plan, several heroes down and the symbiotic celestials attacking, Reed begins to panic. Iron Man responds in a surprisingly comforting tone, asking Reed to calm down and ask for someone to help get Dylan away from Knull. Iron Man reveals that his original plan with the symbiotic dragon is finally falling into place. The Extremist has disconnected the symbiote dragon from Knull's hive mind, and Iron Man has a chance to do the same to the Celestials. We see Iron Man using one of the Celestials to attack the other. With Dylan trapped, Knull tells him to not be afraid. Dylan is the child of his children, and so Knull is the only family he has now. He just wants to talk to Dylan. All hope is lost as Knull finally has what he came for. We hear the voice once again narrating over the fight, reminding us that there is a power that is the opposite of Knull, a god of light. This is the source of Dylan's power. The symbiotic dome that covers Earth is blocking this powerful beam of light from getting through. It cannot break through, but I can, and I am on my way. We see the Silver Surfer approaching Earth. Chapter 4. Lightning. We see Dylan, standing alone inside a symbiotic dome, surrounded by the glaring eyes of the symbiotes currently trapping him. Knull suddenly appears. He explains to Dylan that he was made to destroy Knull, but he would never let that happen. Knull took down the heroes and has control of the planet. Knull tells Dylan that he is special and is in many ways his own son. Throughout this conversation, Dylan hears another voice in his head, undetected by Knull. The voice reassures Dylan that they are a friend. They want to help Dylan to break out, and they tell him to use his powers to break into his hive mind. They try to help Dylan as Knull continues. He tells Dylan he can offer him the darkness, and together they can end this war. Either he joins, or Knull will burn this world to the ground. Dylan looks up. He has an angry but focused look on his face, his eyes black with the red spirals, and he reminds Knull, "You killed my dad." Dylan's hands glow whilst holding onto Knull's wrist. This appears to hurt Knull. The voice is pushing Dylan, telling him to reach out through the hive mind. Dylan uses all of his effort to pull the symbiotes away from the heroes, including Cyclops, Human Torch, Sue Richards. Knowing symbiotes are weak to lightning and magic, Thor is quick to rejoin the fight, along with Doctor Strange, who has used his Asgardian staff to boost his powers. The voice is now communicating with Cyclops, Invisible Woman, Human Torch, Doctor Strange, and Thor, preparing a battle plan. Everybody prepares themselves before letting out an impressive attack on the symbiotes, each of our heroes letting out a huge blast of energy. The voice then calls out to Namor, telling him that he is up next. Huge waves of water flood the city as we see Celestials continue to fight. Symbiotic dragons fill the sky. The voice then speaks out to Storm and Thor and commands them to light it up before releasing two huge bolts of lightning that strike the water. We see Knull scream in pain as his symbiote army is being wiped out. Angered by this, a frustrated Knull lunges towards Dylan, grabbing a hold of him before being interrupted by the voice. Knull hesitates as Jean Grey steps forward, eyes glowing as she says, "Let's see what makes you bleed." Knull's eyes glow red as Jean Grey invades his mind, trying to find a weakness to use against him. Jean Grey struggles to find anything. He was forged in the darkness. He has bent it to his will. She detects that there is another, a reaction, a force for balance in the universe. With darkness, there is light. A light that becomes something new. A light that would choose an individual host to bond with. Jean Grey faints as she tells Cyclops that the light can't get through to Earth. Now we see the Silver Surfer on the outside of the symbiote barrier surrounding the planet. We see a bright light attempting to break through. Silver Surfer then assists in breaking through the barrier as we see a huge powerful force swoop down to the scene of the battle. Back in the lab, Reed Richards finally recognizes the energy readings he previously found. He knows what it is. He laughs as he says, "Captain Universe, finally, the Enigma force solved." We see Eddie Brock's body, glowing with a powerful force, the light, known as the Enigma force, finding its host, speaking to him, letting him know that he has been chosen. Chapter 5, Dawn. Silver Surfer has joined the battlefield. He stares down Knull as Knull recognizes him, and he asks if they've met before. Silver Surfer's board transforms into a large sword, and he tells him that although they've met before, he remains unimpressed. There is another now, a god of light. Knull then draws a large red sword, the Necro Sword, whilst he prepares to fight. We see Captain America shout, "Avengers, assemble!" Followed by our heroes Spider-Man, Cyclops, Wolverine, Thing, Doctor Strange, Jean Grey, Iron Man, Thor, and many others. All of a sudden, we see a stream of light swoop down and land in front of them. We see Eddie Brock emerge in a large black symbiote form, glowing with energy. He tells everyone he has it from here. Mjolnir then flies out of Thor's hand, along with the Silver Surfer's board, as Venom now stands tall, wielding both in two hands. Knull has fought Venom before, but he hasn't fought Eddie Brock. Our heroes are in awe of Eddie Brock, as he merges the two weapons before lunging forward with a huge glowing axe, resembling the symbiote spider logo. Knull begins to flee, flying past several dragons trying to protect Knull. In one sweep, Eddie Brock is able to decapitate all of them. Knull fights back aggressively, appearing behind Eddie as he swings the Necro Sword down, aiming for the head. Eddie blocks the sword easily. He tells Knull, "No more. No more swords. No more dragons. Just you and me." throwing Knull to the ground. Eddie is ready to take the finishing blow as the symbiotic Celestial reaches out to grab him. Seemingly at ease, Eddie jumps up and removes the head of the Celestial in one swing of his axe. He turns his attention back to Knull as the Celestial falls to the ground. After grabbing Knull by the throat, he says, "All the pain, the fear, the agony as you ripped my other from me. I remember all of it," before plunging his axe into Knull's chest and pulling his symbiotic armor away from him, just as Knull had once done to Eddie when separating him from Venom. He lets go of Knull as he falls defenselessly. Eddie taunts Knull, telling him to get back up. Knull just smiles as he says, "You can't win. You may kill me, but the darkness lives in your son." Eddie is angered by the statement about Dylan, grabbing Knull and flying directly through the symbiotic barrier surrounding the Earth. Knull ranting on about the darkness, the void, is eternal and it lives on in Dylan. Flying extremely close to the sun, Knull visibly in pain, Eddie tells him he is doing this for Dylan, before Knull begins to disappear, burnt up and turned to ash by the light of the sun. The voice of the God of Light speaks out to Eddie, telling him that the symbiotes within the hive mind are now free. Eddie returns to Earth. The symbiote barrier has disappeared and brings light back to the battlefield. The symbiotes and the symbiotic landscape fade away as our heroes greet him. Spider-Man smiles and exclaims, "You did it! It's over!" With a panicking look on his face, Eddie approaches Dylan, as Dylan is screaming out in pain with his black and red eyes. He still has a piece of Knull inside of him. Eddie consoles Dylan as he reaches inside of him with a glowing hand, pulling out a purple piece of symbiote and crushing it in his hand. The voice of the God of Light speaks out to Eddie once again, stating that he doesn't need the power anymore. Eddie has a new role. He has become something else as his new form slowly disappears off his body, quickly being replaced with Venom as he returns to Eddie for the first time since Knull separated them. Eddie tells Venom he can hear the voices. He can hear the symbiotes in the hive mind, but he cannot understand them. He forms large wings as he reassures Dylan that he'll be right back. Flying through the air, followed by the remaining symbiote dragons, Venom translates the voices for Eddie and lets him know that as he was the one to vanquish Knull, he is now the nexus of the hive mind, the god of symbiotes, and the new King in Black. Just as I said in the intro, I told you it was pretty dark, it's pretty intense, and let's be honest, Knull is pretty terrifying, but in the end of the day, it's super impressive that Eddie Brock has become the new King in Black after everything he went through. He passed away, and he came back stronger than ever, wielding the Enigma Force. Did you see the axe he was wielding? Insane, insane. Make sure you leave a comment telling me your favorite characters or your favorite storylines that you want me to recap. Whatever you want from the channel, let me know. But for the time being, peace, peace, peace.